What up, what up? Happy Friday to you. And welcome to the Faith Unbuttoned Podcast. I'm your host, Pastor K. And don't forget, we are an extension of Never Alone Christian Center. And we are here to speak about faith. Our goal is to make it transparent and relevant to everyday life. Thank you for your continuous support of Never Alone Christian Center. And in your free time, please join us on all our social media platforms on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. And make sure you check out our website at neveralonecc.org. Now that the business is out the way, what's up, guys? How has your Friday been? I don't know about you, but I am always excited about Friday because the week has come to an end and we are preparing for the weekend. In my particular case, with my profession, and I'm fortunate that I am off on Saturday and Sunday, and I always look forward to that time, honestly, so I can chill and relax. Specifically around this type of time of the year, you already know we're out here representing Baltimore, the Baltimore Ravens, and we don't play until Monday, but nevertheless, I enjoy watching the game, both college and professional. I look forward to this weekend of games. So tonight, we're going to continue with, this is our part number 2. If you've been following the podcast, last week we touched on a very interesting subject matter, which is we are done with having children. So should we do the tube tie thing or should we do the snip thing? And last week, you guys, I was, as I mentioned, I was at dance with my daughter and I didn't have my video available at the time, but we still were able to push out the audio of the podcast. So make sure if you missed last week that you grab it, stream it on YouTube, Facebook, IGTV, as well as Anchor FM or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast, so that you can connect last week's part 1 with this week's part 2. And not to go back too far over what we went over last week, but the discussion came up amongst my wife and I, and we believe that we're at that point where we're approaching 40 soon, and we have Kalia, who's 12, and we have Kenton, who's 10, and we're at that point where we believe that we're done with children, and I'm ready to take the step into getting the snip or the vasectomy. So we looked at the discussion, and I wanted to in part 2 look at some people who have had the procedure done. So I did some basic research on YouTube. No secret to my sources there, and there were several people on there who've had the procedure done, and I wanted to share their experience with us on my particular platform as people who've gone through it. Male have gone through it, and one who actually is a urologist, who actually is a doctor and has had the procedure as well. But just so we understand where we were or where we are, and as married couples, how do we even get to this decision? Briefly for us, there's basically 5 particular reasons why we feel like we're done with children. One, obviously, we have children, and another reason was cost. We looked at the cost of having children, childcare, school, a larger vehicle, car seats, food, etc., strollers. All those things cost. We look at career placement, where we are in our career. Do we want to be retired with a child in 5th grade? And time management. Do we have the time to take on a newborn? With the current setup we have, and also the pressure of parents to navigate a newborn or a new child into this world. And number 5, I said simply, we're comfortable where we are. So if you're married and you're in this place and you have children and you feel like you're done with children, we looked at both sides of the particular scenario, whether it should be the tube tied or whether it should be the snip. And we looked at the technical terms for that, because those are the terms that we have become accustomed to. And the tube tied technical term is tubal ligation, which we said last week is a surgical procedure to prevent pregnancy. It has commonly been called getting your tubes tied. And we look at the vasectomy is the surgical procedure for men who are sure or they don't want to have any future pregnancy, commonly called snip or snip. So we looked at those particular 2 different terms, and we looked at why we get to this bridge in life, and instead of as a man of putting the pressure on the woman to get something done or to remain with female birth control, which we know deals with the hormones and things of that nature. I looked at the suggestion of the man getting it done because it's less invasive. As we learned last week, it's a short process, about 7 minutes. It's about a 2-day recovery. It costs around $1,000 on the high end, very low health risk, and it's done in a doctor's office versus the tubal ligation factors we looked at, where it's about 120 to 180 minute procedure. It's a 4 to 7 day recovery. And it ranges in the price range of $5,000 to $8,500. There are some health risks, and this is also done in a operating room. So from a basic standpoint, in my opinion, if I've made it known on this podcast, I'm speaking from my opinion, that it seems more beneficial, if you will, or a more health conscious or safe option for the man to consider the vasectomy. Because one thing, if you're married and you're at this place, one thing that husband and wife can't agree on, we don't want any more children. So the question comes in, okay, so what are we going to do to prevent this? I personally am not a fan of condoms and contraceptives for the man. You know, we spoke briefly last week where my wife has maintained that particular aspect of the birth control, and I always ask myself, why is it always the woman's responsibility to carry that, if you will, burden of preventing pregnancy? And these birth controls come with various hormonal type side effects and stuff like that, and weight gain and blood clots and all other type of things. When we're looking for the quote unquote permanent solution to prevent pregnancy, why is it that the man doesn't take this option more so? And throughout the research I've been doing, now that I'm entertaining this particular procedure, and I see that there are a lot of men who have gotten it done. And I just want to say it's nothing as a man to be embarrassed about. One of the clips that I'm plugging into the podcast, once I'm done here with this little overview, speak about, you know, a lot of men are embarrassed about it, or they feel like that they no longer ejaculate, and the ejaculation process is actually broken down into 3 different components, and the sperm within the ejaculation process is only 1% of, or 1 to 5% of the actual ejaculation. So you will still have that experience. It just will not contain the sperm which are there. There are a lot of components tied into there. There are a lot of myths about the vasectomy that are just false. So I wanted to bring a couple of people who have been interviewed with this particular subject matter and just tap them into the podcast so that you can hear for yourself on the particular procedure. Obviously, a woman would have a different perspective than a man. This particular podcast, I believe, or this particular subject matter is geared toward to men, because I don't want husbands to be embarrassed about the procedure and think that you're less than a man, and think that is something that, well, the woman should just get it done, is not my responsibility. I want you to be open-minded about it and consider the safer option, if you will, that is available. You know, especially if you understand that you are no longer desire to have any more children, and that's okay. So without further ado, I'm going to plug in here 3 different interviews about the particular subject matter. So hang on.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jesse Mills, Director of UCLA Health, the Men's Clinic. I'm here today to present hot topics in men's health. One of the things that I get all the time, questions in my clinic about men wanting vasectomies. They want to know what's going to happen after a vasectomy. And so what I want to talk about today is 5 myths about vasectomy. So these are the things that aren't going to happen to you that you need to know when you're making an informed decision about your post-fatherhood birth control options. So myth number 1, I stop ejaculating after vasectomy. So we got to learn a little bit about anatomy to understand what that means. So a man's ejaculate, the fluid that comes out, the semen, is actually made up of 3 different organ systems fluids. Number 1 is the testicular fluid. That's the sperm. That makes up less than 1% of the overall semen volume. Number 2 is fluid from the seminal vesicles, which are these 2 little paired structures that are deep in the pelvis that actually ejaculates the sugar and the fluid component that keeps sperm healthy and alive for them to do their job. And the third is the prostate gland. When we do vasectomies, what we're doing is just cutting off the sperm tubes only. So in other words, 99.9% of what you ejaculated fluid-wise before your vasectomy, you're going to do just fine after your vasectomy. So that's the biggest myth. Myth number 2 is, I stopped making sperm after vasectomies. Also not true. So what happens after a man gets a vasectomy to those sperm? It's the exact same thing that happens to those sperm if a man doesn't ejaculate for days, months, hard to imagine, but years, then the sperm just involute. They get reabsorbed by the body and are reproduced again down the road with those same components. So in other words, nothing happens to your sperm. They're just hanging out, waiting for their day in the sun. Myth number 3, it's easier for my wife to get this taken care of than me. So let's talk about that, guys. It really is time to man up here, because women have to go through a much more invasive procedure to get their tubes tied or to have any kind of insert placed for them to not get pregnant. Vasectomy is a 10 to 15 minute procedure that most of the time we do with just a little local anesthetic. You're back doing whatever you need really within a week. So minimally invasive compared to what our wives and partners have to go through. Myth number 4, vasectomy causes cancer. This is something that I've seen over the years. I've even had men come in asking me to reverse their vasectomy because they're worried about cancer, prostate, testicular, you name it. They've heard it, they've read it, they're worried about it. I get it. Cancer bad. Vasectomy usually good. What it turns out, we really don't know that entire story, but hundreds and hundreds of thousands of men in this country alone get vasectomies, and we're not really seeing a huge increase in any of our cancer risks. So again, this is a relative risk that we don't even have enough information to counsel men on, but does not seem to be relevant or significant enough to cause any kind of alarm about vasectomy. Myth number 5, this is a big one. This is what guys are so worried about, is vasectomy is going to kill my mojo. It's going to get rid of my testosterone. I won't have any interest in sex anymore. And probably the exact opposite is true. Vasectomy itself has very little to do with testosterone production. In fact, probably nothing. Testosterone is made in the testicle, but it's made and then secreted through the bloodstream, which we don't alter when we're doing a vasectomy. So all the blood vessels that were there before the vasectomy are there after the vasectomy. What it does do for most men is it actually liberates them. If you're not worried about yet another pregnancy, yet another college fund, yet another ding in your retirement, then you can actually relax, enjoy sex a little bit more. And a lot of men talk about the fact that after their vasectomy, they're even happier and more liberated and maybe even have a higher libido. So don't worry about that. Totally unrelated. If a vasectomy is the right procedure for you, go ahead and schedule it.
Let's start from the beginning.
I got a vasectomy, and I'd like to tell you about it, and why you should get a vasectomy too. I had for years just relied on my wife to handle birth control, and yet for years I thought it just wasn't my problem. Like, oh yeah, birth control is a thing that she does. And then I started thinking about, why is she the one who's carrying this burden? And as soon as I made that shift in my mind, I didn't feel like I could face myself with integrity and not take that on myself. Every argument I made against getting a vasectomy, it was invasive, I didn't want to mess with my body, was the same argument she could make for wanting not to put hormones in her body, or a ring, or pills, or whatever. Another part is I was doing it with foresight. I grew up in a broken home. I have 3 half-brothers who I love, but I never see. And the dynamic that I had growing up with his other families was really difficult. I knew that if things didn't work out with my wife, I didn't want to have to make the decision at that point whether or not to have more kids. So I wanted to make the decision now before it was ever an issue and take it off the table. So I started looking into vasectomies. It's a pretty easy procedure. Compare that with a tubal ligation, which is what my wife would have gone through, and that is a serious and major surgery. This guy said he would just clip my vas deferens and I'd be good to go. He looked at my balls, he said they were cool, and that the procedure would take like an afternoon and then a little bit more healing. Then I would have to masturbate 20 times. Then the vasectomy will have taken. When I got the procedure, it was fun, we chatted, and there's just like smoke coming from my crotch. But it took like 5 minutes. I didn't know at the time that I was gonna get separated from my wife, and now I am. It is true that I feel a lot of pressure to be able to have kids. And now I'm on Bumble. Every person that I match with is like kids sometimes. Well, with me, there's no chance. Getting a vasectomy is like hiding your keys when you're sober, so when you're drunk, you're not tempted to drive. Like, I got a vasectomy when I was married. I didn't want to have more kids. I'm sure down the road, the lonelier and more desperate I get, there'll be more and more pressure to procreate to satisfy the needs, wants, and desires of my prospective partners. And I've taken that off the table. And I'm so happy and so grateful that I don't have that temptation. Even if you're happily married, labor equity is an unassailable argument for getting a vasectomy. My name is Joshua David Stein. I think I shared like 85% too much, but let me know what you think. Would you get a vasectomy? Have you gotten a vasectomy? Should we make like a Snip club where we can get together and talk about our vasectomies? Let me know. Okay. Bye.
Hi, I'm Dan Resnicek, and today I'm going to interview a urologist who recently underwent a vasectomy by me. Hello, I'm Dr. Daniel Roeder, and I just had a vasectomy about 3 weeks ago. Why did you choose to get a vasectomy? Why not another form of birth control? Well, I think a vasectomy is a minimally invasive, easy procedure that takes about 30 minutes with only a local anesthetic. And so I didn't have to get a general anesthetic, and it was pretty quick. Why not ask your wife to do a different form of birth control? Well, most female versions of birth control they require hormonal treatment. Or like laparoscopic tubal ligation, which is much, much more invasive. So this is a way for us not to have any more kids without using any hormones, and also not requiring an invasive surgery. As a urologist who performs vasectomies, was the procedure different than you had expected? Nope, it was really exactly what I would have expected. It took about as long as it was supposed to take, which is usually about 20 to 30 minutes, and drove myself home afterwards and, took it easy for a couple of days, and it's pretty much as expected. What do you mean by as expected? What was recovery like for you? So recovery was, the next 2 days after surgery, like I said, was just sitting around, watching movies, paying some bills, doing some work, desk work, not physical work. I took Tylenol and ibuprofen, kind of went back and forth between the two of them, and then used a bag of frozen peas to ice myself about 3 times a day. So that was what I did for my kind of post-op recovery. And then after that, I kind of take it easy for probably about 2 weeks. So what was your pain like after the procedure? The pain wasn't bad. I had lidocaine to numb things up, and that kept things numb for probably about an hour, maybe after the surgery. But the pain really wasn't bad, especially since I took it easy for a couple of days. I would say that, I have had a little bit of, discomfort over the last couple of weeks, just nothing that's really limited my activity, but you just kind of feel like you've had something done. But otherwise everything was kind of, like I said, as expected. Should someone who undergoes a vasectomy expect any changes in their sex life? There will be no changes to your sex life. Your sperm only contributes about 5% of all of your ejaculatory volume. So the volume of your ejaculate won't go down. It doesn't affect your erections, doesn't affect your testosterone, nothing like that. So it's really very, very minimal changes.
Would you undergo a vasectomy again? And what would you recommend to someone else?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, it's so much less invasive than what your significant others or wives have to go through. So I definitely would do it again.
Vasectomy is a procedure for permanent male sterilization. It's done to prevent a male from fathering further children. I do a no scalpel vasectomy. That involves a procedure where I make a small incision just below the scrotum. I am able to pull up the vas, which is the structure, the tube that carries the sperm from the testicle into the body. Each vas is brought up through that small hole. I cut out a segment, I burn both ends, I clip both ends, and I do that in a way so that both ends are in different tissue layers so that the sperm really can't find a way back together again. The most common risks associated with vasectomy include bleeding, infection, failure of the procedure, whether it's early or long-term, and there's a very small rate of chronic pain associated with the procedure that's most commonly treated with just anti-inflammatory medication. For contraception, vasectomy is one of the best methods. It's not 100% effective, but it's over 99% effective. One of the most important things that I tell my patients before and after the vasectomy is that you're not sterile until you have the lab test that says you are. So there's still sperm within the system, within the tubing, that can get out in the time period until you have the lab test that says that you're sterile. We typically do the lab test at about 8 weeks after procedure, or 15 to 20 ejaculations. Because we don't have that lab result until at least 8 weeks or 15 to 20 ejaculations, patients must use another form of contraception until they have the lab test that confirms that they're no longer able to father children, that there's no sperm present within the semen. Most patients who are considering vasectomy have several children. They've talked about it with their partner. They've been considering it for usually over a year, and they're often over 30.
Yo, some very good information there. I think that it is through the various dialogue there with those that have gone through the procedure. It from my perspective, it feels like, or it seems to be a no-brainer for the man and the husband to get this procedure done, because me personally, I just don't want my wife to have to go through the surgical process of getting it done, where something that I can do to prevent the pregnancy and allow us to continue to develop our family, and help her to avoid going through any health issues. So I'm thankful that I was able to find that information. Once again, no secret to my source. I simply went to YouTube and found some people who've had the procedure done, as well as some medical facilities and universities who've done some studies on it as well. So if you still are kind of on the fence, brothers, and you kind of feel like, well, I don't know, or if you're a woman and you're a wife and you're watching this, you want to share it with your husband, tell him to check out podcast 1 and 2 of this particular topic, so he can get a better gist of it, because at the end of the day, as we once said, as I roll into my final thoughts here is, husband and wife, we've made the decision, hey, we're done with children, we have children, or we don't desire children, and we want to prevent the pregnancy from taking place. So what are we going to do about it? So again, I balance both perspectives there, of the vasectomy as well as the tubal ligation, which is the tube ties versus the snip. All right. So if you got any questions, concerns, or thoughts, tap into me on the DM, drop me a comment, shoot me an email, whatever the case may be. And I certainly hope that you enjoyed this particular interesting subject matter, because I think a lot of times as men, we avoid this particular topic, especially in the church, because we just don't want to face these topics that are real, and they have to be addressed. I've never heard this particular topic spoken about in church. Not to say that it hasn't been. I just haven't heard it, and I've been in church for a long time. So I want to give you my perspective from a pastor's perspective, from a Christian's perspective, from a husband's perspective, on what I feel or how I feel, in my opinion, about the idea of, hey, we're done with children, so what should we do so that we can move forward and continue to raise our children, but we don't want to have another child? All right. I love you guys. Thank you for tapping in tonight. Continue to stream the podcast. If you enjoy it, drop a thumbs up on YouTube. Make sure you check us out over there. As well as, don't forget, we'll be streaming this Sunday, our Sunday service. We got a new series. I'll be dropping that information tomorrow on the platform. So make sure you tap in and enjoy your weekend. Let's go.